a large-scale child trafficking scheme. Odessa police were shocked. Underage orphans were being sold to foreigners for the price of a used car. This is TSN Online. My name is Natalia Ostroska. Subscribe to this channel and like this episode. Let's get started. An audience with the Pope. President Zelensky's European tour continues. What agreements were made in the Vatican and Rome? And why is Trump advising Ukrainians to hold elections? A sensational revelation.
After martial law was imposed, there was a direct ban on taking our Ukrainian children abroad for the purpose of adoption. In
Odessa, child traffickers who were taking orphans abroad were detained. Who was involved in the scheme and what punishment do they face? Christmas trees have traveled from Lviv to Kharkiv.
Our Christmas tree from Denmark has arrived from Europe, Nordman variety.
Where are the markets the most expensive? Russian occupiers attacked the frontline and border regions of Ukraine. Let's start with the situation in the regions. The Russians carried out more than 100 strikes on settlements in the Sumy region. They mainly used artillery and drones to attack the Sumy district. Today, the enemy hit a car with a drone in the Ternopil community. A 73-year-old driver was killed. In Ternopil, a drone strike on a car caused injuries incompatible with life. A 61-year-old driver died and a 54-year-old female passenger was hospitalized. For the second day in a row, emergency repair work continues in Okturka. The city is recovering after a Russian strike on a 9-story building during which 7 people were injured. And several families have been left homeless because their apartments were completely burned out. At the site of the strikes, rescuers, utility workers, and volunteers are working, helping residents whose homes have been damaged. Let me remind you, the night before, the Russians targeted the apartment building with 3 drones. The Russians are also targeting civilians in the Kherson region. During the day, an explosive was dropped from a drone onto a motorcyclist in Rozhane. The man was hospitalized with shrapnel wounds to his face and limbs. Another victim in the regional center, a 59-year-old man, suffered blast injuries as a result of enemy shelling. And the day before, war criminals killed an elderly woman and a utility worker. More than a dozen houses, medical and educational institutions, a cell tower, and a gas pipeline were damaged. In Zaporizhzhia region, the Russians used a drone to strike a civilian car in one of the villages. The driver and passenger were wounded. And in Belgium, a strike UAV was directed at a parked ambulance. The car's roof was damaged, but there were no casualties. In the Zaporizhzhia district, a fire and rescue station was also shelled. The roof, windows, and doors there were damaged. In Donetsk region, the Russians killed 3 people and wounded 16 others. In Kostiantynivka, 2 local residents were killed and 2 more were injured. In addition, the occupiers struck a family with a drone while they were riding bicycles to fetch water. A 7-year-old girl, a 12-year-old boy, and their parents were wounded. Another family with children was injured in Kramatorsk. 2 children aged 6 and 8 and their parents were wounded. 7 drones struck Drushkivka. The enemy attack claimed 1 life and 5 city residents were wounded. Another person was injured in Serhivka. As a result of a drone strike, the number of people killed in Ternopil after the missile attack in November has risen to 38. Law enforcement officers have identified the remains of 2 more bodies. One of them belonged to a 4-year-old girl. She is the 8th child who did not survive the Russian attack on the city. On November 19th, when war criminals destroyed a 9-story building with 1 missile and set fire to 2 entrances of a neighboring building with another. Nearly 100 people were injured. 10 victims are still in the hospital, including 2 children. 3 more adults are considered missing. The damaged apartment building has already begun to be dismantled. A special commission has declared it unfit for restoration. Crosses will be placed at the site, and later a memorial to the victims will be established. Will critical infrastructure facilities in Ukraine start being disconnected from electricity? This is how the government plans to reduce the duration of power outages for household consumers. This was reported by RBC Ukraine, citing a source in the government. Currently, there are many household and commercial consumers on the lines with critically important facilities who are not subject to restrictions. This causes dissatisfaction among those who are less fortunate. Therefore, the government plans to review the list of critical infrastructure facilities and disconnect those among them that have alternative power sources. This will allow for slightly shorter periods without electricity in the regions and a fairer redistribution of electricity among household consumers. The day before, Prime Minister Yulia Sviridenko stated that the Cabinet of Ministers would take measures to reduce the duration of power outages, which, for example, in Kyiv now last up to 16 hours a day. Last night, Russia once again struck at Ukraine's energy facilities. This morning, emergency power outages were implemented in 4 regions, in particular in Poltava and Sumy regions, which were under heavy attack last night. Furthermore, emergency outages have spread to several more regions. This is a consequence of previous Russian attacks on the energy sector, according to Ukrenergo. We are working very actively on all components of possible steps to end the war. Volodymyr Zelensky sums up his European tour. On his social media, he wrote that the Ukrainian and European components of the peace plan have already been worked out. Moreover, our team is ready to present them to our American partners. Today, Zelensky was on a visit to Italy and managed to meet with Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni as well as Pope Leo XIV. With the pontiff, they discussed the exchange of prisoners and the return of abducted Ukrainian children. Zelensky also invited Leo XIV to visit Ukraine. Before Italy, the president of Ukraine managed to visit London and Brussels. Together with European leaders, they tried to finalize the peace plan and coordinate security guarantees. The president also announced a new meeting of the coalition with an expanded group of interested parties.
This week we will have a coalition of the willing. No spoilers yet about which day, but it will be a large gathering. Basically, our document is already prepared. Now we need to coordinate this with the American side regarding the overall infrastructure of Ukraine's security guarantees and where the coalition of the willing fits into that. We don't want there to be any conflicting issues.
The fate of the frozen Russian assets may be decided in the coming weeks, according to British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. This very topic was raised by leaders at the meeting in London with Volodymyr Zelensky the day before. The main focus is on £8 billion held in bank accounts in the United Kingdom, which could be transferred to Ukraine. However, the question regarding the rest of the aggressor country's assets around the world remains open. The European Union, for example, needs to resolve this issue, December 18th. The G7 countries issued a statement in which they promised to explore ways to use frozen Russian assets to achieve a just and lasting peace in Ukraine. At the same time, one of the G7 countries, Japan, refused, according to the press, to support the European Union's plan to use a reparations loan from funds held in a Belgian bank. Euroclear. He said that Europe is in decline, Russia is in a strong position, and advised Ukraine to hold elections. Donald Trump made new statements in a recent interview with Politico. In his opinion, the Kremlin's position is stronger because Russia is larger than Ukraine in terms of territory. As for Ukraine, he believes it should agree to the proposed terms since it has already suffered many losses. Trump also commented on the elections in Ukraine. In his view, it's time for them to be held. And there was also a bit of modern geography from the US president. In his interview with Politico, he shared his knowledge about a pro-Ukrainian Crimea, which is washed by several sides by the ocean.
Obama gave up Crimea because that peninsula was the heart. You know, deep down, I'm a real estate person. I understand this very well. And every time I look at the map, I think, oh, this Crimea, it's so beautiful. Wow. It's surrounded by the ocean on 4 sides in the warmest part. The weather there is the best. Everything is the best.
Donald Trump topped the list of the most influential people in Europe, according to Politico. The publication released its ranking. Volodymyr Zelensky also made the list. He is in 14th place, and Vladimir Putin. He was given 5th place. In its editorial article, Politico explains how this list was compiled. Here is a quote. The continent's leaders have been completely thrown off balance. The return of Donald Trump to the office of US president hit like an earthquake for countries and institutions that are still reeling from the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. The speed with which Washington turned from a reliable ally into a potential adversary has shaken the very foundations on which Europe has long relied. The list, the publication notes, includes those who accepted the challenge or seized the moment to advance their own agendas. And these people will influence global politics in the coming year. A Russian An-22 military transport plane has crashed, Preliminary reports say there were 7 people on board. According to local media, the aircraft went down in an uninhabited area in Russia's Ivanovo region. The plane belongs to the Russian Ministry of Defense. According to the agency, it was conducting a routine flight after repairs and crashed in the area of the Uvetsky Reservoir. There, Russian channels report fragments of the aircraft have already been found on the water. Investigators in Russia are currently clarifying the circumstances of the crash. By the way, the An-22 is designed for transporting heavy and oversized military equipment as well as troops and for airborne landings over long distances. Ukrainian children were taken abroad to be sold there for the price of a used car. Odessa law enforcement officers uncovered a criminal group trafficking Ukrainian orphaned children. Underage residents of orphanages were taken abroad supposedly for vacations through so-called hostings. These were short-term trips for children to stay with foreign families during summer or winter holidays. There, the children were offered for money to childless families. The money from the sales was received through an international payment system. According to this scheme, 13 orphaned children from orphanages in the Odessa region were already taken out of Ukraine. Another 5 were intercepted by law enforcement officers on their way to the border crossing point. The prosecutor's office has notified 3 organizers of suspicion. They are 2 female translators and the founder of a charitable foundation. They forged documents and arranged trips with guardianship authorities. In total, about 15 people were involved in the scheme, including transporters who directly smuggled minors across the border.
After martial law was imposed, there was a direct ban on taking our foreign children abroad for the purpose of their identification. That's why only such a scheme allowed the criminals to do this. At present, we are also checking for involvement in these operations. We are actively investigating employees of relevant state agencies who are directly responsible for this specific area of work and thoroughly checking whether they explicitly gave any consent or were directly involved in the unlawful removal of children to foreign countries abroad.
Our correspondents are uncovering more details about this shocking story. Already tomorrow, watch for new details in our upcoming broadcasts. We will keep this topic in the spotlight. In the meantime, write in the comments what your first feelings were when you heard the news from Odessa about the sale and transportation of children abroad. The High Anti-Corruption Court is choosing a preventive measure, Ani-Skoro. According to the Security Service of Ukraine, NABU and SAP, the Member of Parliament led a criminal group. Together with her accomplices, she extorted $250,000 from an entrepreneur. In exchange, she promised that sanctions from the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine would be imposed on the competitor's company. The MP was assisted by others. According to the investigation, her assistant and several intermediaries were involved. Law enforcement officers documented the receipt of the first part of the bribe, amounting to $125,000. This money was allegedly supposed to be passed on to NSDC officials. However, the individuals involved in the case were unable to find the right person who would agree to take the bribe. Now, prosecutors are requesting a preventive measure for the MP in the form of bail. Yesterday, such a measure was chosen for her assistant. The MP herself calls the case pressure on the opposition and denies any involvement in any schemes. By the way, this is not the first scandal involving this MP. Back in 2019, she was expelled from the Servant of the People Party, and later she was accused of voting in sync with OPZZ's, trading in parliamentary inquiries. She also appeared on the Mindich tapes in a case concerning corruption in the energy sector. The crimes of the Russians, the identification of all the bodies found in the Izium forest in the Kharkiv region after deoccupation, has been completed. This was reported by the Izium City Military Administration. A mass grave near the city, in the forest belt and at the civilian cemetery, was discovered after its liberation. People were buried in mass graves, often without names, only with numbers on plaques. The exhumation lasted for 3 years. In total, the names of 449 people have been identified. Among them are civilians, volunteers, local activists, as well as 23 Ukrainian armed forces soldiers. During the exhumation and forensic examinations, signs of violent death were found on a number of the bodies. According to the prosecutor's office, these include evidence of torture, gunshot wounds, and blast injuries. The prosecutor's office noted that they have already investigated several criminal cases regarding torture and murder. He was always smiling and radiated warmth. Today, at St. Michael's Golden Domed Cathedral in Kyiv, family and comrades said their goodbyes to 41-year-old Ivan Kononenko. The volunteer, known by the call sign Conan, was killed in battles in the Kursk region a year ago. But the family was only able to bury the hero now. Why? And where have you definitely seen the defender's face before? Earlier? TSN correspondent Irina Kondrachuk will tell us more.
He went abroad again. An urgent business trip. I'll be back, not sure when. I won't have any connection.
This is the last post by the soldier known as Conan on social media. Hopeful comments wishing him luck are replaced by desperate condolences. 9 days after the post, Senior Lieutenant Ivan Kononenko is killed in battles in the Kursk region. This is confirmed by his comrades. But due to the inability to retrieve and identify the body, Ivan will remain for months on the list of those who are neither here nor there. Conan volunteered for the war in the first days of the full-scale invasion. Before that, he was a fitness trainer and acted in films.
He was such a media-savvy, creative person. He acted alongside our president in Servant of the People and in many other movies.
Among Ivan's works are Servant of the People, Kreposnaya, The First Swallows, Crazy Wedding, Kyiv Day and Night, Real Mysticism, and others. He was socially active and incredibly kind, his friends say.
Vanya was with us. From the very first day, he was an absolutely fearless person. From the very first days to Chernihiv region and then to Donbass, to Bakhmut.
Not even a severe injury that Ivan sustained in 2023 could stop his drive to fight.
Came back to the old ways, so you guys are really handling things over there?
Rehabilitation complete, he served in the Territorial Recruitment Center, once recovered, rejoined frontline.
I blame myself, Komlia brothers, for not talking you out of it.
He volunteered. In the consolidated company, he took part in the liberation of the Kursk region.
Ivan, who was 41 years old, is survived by 2 sons, his parents, his wife and his sister, Irina Kondrachuk, Georgy Voronov, Anatoly Korob. TSN 1+1.